It might come as a surprise to those who think Christianity gets in the way of science. It might even come as a surprise to those who think of science as getting in the way of Christians. The truth is, modern science developed in the Christian culture. In spite of the current culture wars, history shows that science is built on the rational foundation provided by Christianity.
What would make someone believe Christianity holds back the advancement of knowledge?
One often cited example is the 17th century story of Galileo Galilei's conflict with the Catholic Church.
Galileo was a faithful Catholic and a friend of the Pope, which made him a political insider. Pope Urban VIII asked Galileo to write about Nicholas Copernicus's idea that the universe is more easily understood if the Earth moves around the Sun instead of the Sun circling the Earth.
At the time, most Catholic and Protestant scholars thought the Earth was a stationary globe at the center of the universe.
I thought they believed the Earth was flat.
No, that is a common myth. Even the ancient Greeks knew the Earth was a globe. Greek philosophers, including Aristotle, placed the spherical Earth at the center of the universe. This geocentric cosmology was further developed by the 2nd century Greek astronomer Ptolemy, whose model of the universe prevailed among Christian scholars during the Middle Ages.
In Ptolemy's Aristotle-inspired system, the sun, moon, stars, and planets orbited the spherical Earth.
The medieval theologian Thomas Aquinas amalgamated Christian doctrines with Aristotle's philosophy. Ptolemy's cosmology became part of the Christian view of reality. The perfect heavens above circled the earth, which acted as a sewer for the universe and contained hell at the very center.
Copernicus's ideas upset this established view. But instead of rejecting the new view without examination, Pope Urban VIII asked Galileo to compare Copernican cosmology with Ptolemy's cosmology.
Galileo believed in observation using the senses of sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. In his view, these empirical senses provided a better understanding of reality than philosophical reasoning.
Looking through his telescope, Galileo saw moons orbiting other planets. If moons revolve around other planets, then Ptolemy's theory that everything in the universe revolves around the Earth can't be true.
Relying on this and other empirical evidence, along with the elegance of Copernican cosmology, Galileo concluded Copernicus had described reality. The Earth does indeed revolve around the Sun.
Perhaps more importantly, he concluded that Aristotle had been wrong about Earth being a different kind of matter than the rest of the universe.
Most literate people and scholars at the time were monks, priests, or others associated with the church. These scholars were steeped in Platonism, Aristotelian scholasticism, and Ptolemy's cosmology. They found Galileo's approach and his conclusions difficult to accept. The situation was complicated by Galileo's abrasive debating tactics, his departure from the theoretical investigation he was asked to conduct, and the usual difficulties anyone faces when challenging prevailing ideas.
An important additional complication was the Protestant Reformation. The Catholic Church had lost much of its authority, and Protestants insisted the Bible was the ultimate authority, not the Pope or tradition.
Protestant and Catholic scholars alike abandoned the traditional view of Augustine, who stated that the Bible doesn't speak to questions of science. Instead, they searched the Bible for proof texts supporting their understanding.
So, Christian scholars misuse the Bible as a weapon to defend their view that the Earth is stationary and at the center of the universe. A view that traces all the way back to the pagan astronomer Ptolemy, not the Bible.
Credibility of the Bible suffered with the advent of Copernican cosmology, not because the Bible is untrue, but because it had been misused to support a specific and incorrect pagan cosmology.
It's a misunderstanding to believe that only the Church stood in the way of science. It was really a battle among scholars in which the Catholic Church sided with then-current scientific orthodoxy.
The story of Galileo is really the story of tradition-bound science struggling against the new science built on empirical evidence. The Church placed itself in the middle of the dispute, and by doing so was linked with the failure of the old science.
So it wasn't Christianity itself that was at the root of the problem?
No, it was badly behaving Christians who should have known better. Everyone involved was intemperate. They conflated Christian doctrines with pagan philosophy and ever-changing science. Ultimately, the most fundamental biblical instruction, to live humbly and respect others, was ignored. The prophet Micah put it this way:
He has shown you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God.
Despite the Galileo example and some others, the brute fact remains that modern science blossomed in Christian culture. This correlation between science and Christianity suggests that Christian beliefs could not have impeded the development of science.
In fact, Christianity seems to have facilitated scientific thinking. Many of the greatest scientists of the past were Christians, people like Isaac Newton, Blaise Pascal, George Washington Carver, James Clerk Maxwell, Louis Pasteur, and many more.
And don't forget that Galileo was a Christian. More recently, there have been many Christians who excel in the sciences.
Yes, there are astronauts like John Glenn and James Irwin, the world-renowned geophysicist John Baumgartner, biologists, paleontologists. Just about every scientific discipline features outstanding Christians.
The example of Galileo does not demonstrate a consistent principle of Christian repression of scientists. And the many practicing Christians who are also world-class scientists exemplify Christianity's ongoing positive role in the development of science.
Christian beliefs encourage scientific investigation of nature. As God's handiwork, the creation is good, and understanding it tells us about the Creator. Studying nature also provides us with practical information that is useful in the world God created for us. To understand why Christianity provides such fertile ground for the development of science, we need to consider three fundamental questions that a reasonable person might ask about science. First, is science potentially productive? Second, is science safe? And third, is science potentially interesting?
What do you mean when you say productive in the first question?
Science looks for regularities in nature. We call these laws. If you believe laws exist, then looking for them may be productive. But if you believe there are no regularities, then looking for them is pointless. A second consideration is whether or not knowledge of natural laws is practically helpful. If not, they may be a curiosity, but not useful.
Okay, so how does Christianity answer these questions in a way that promotes scientific thinking?
Christians believe nature was created and is sustained by a law-giving God who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Finding patterns in nature may be useful because natural laws are as unchanging as the Creator God who made them. Once found, natural laws can be used to predict similar patterns in the future.
So science, according to the Christian view, has the potential to be useful because the laws of nature will not change. Furthermore, these laws are likely to exist because God is a God of laws, not a capricious God.
Christianity also gives a positive response to the second question: is science safe? For Christians, science is safe because the material world is distinct from God. A personal creator made humans in his image and authorized us to manage his creation. The biblical creation account puts it this way.
Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground."
The Bible actively encourages Christians to study the creation as a faith-building exercise, so there is no inherent threat of danger. In the case of King Solomon, the Bible even approvingly provides an example of a heroic figure who studied nature.
God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight, and a breadth of understanding as measureless as the sand on the seashore. He described plant life, from the cedar of Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of walls. He also taught about animals and birds, reptiles and fish.
So, the Christian's Bible is not neutral about studying nature. It actively encourages science, even providing the example of Solomon, who, with God's blessing, did so. Let's move on to question 3. Is the study of nature potentially interesting?
Christian monotheists should be highly motivated to study nature. It is God's handiwork, and we can learn about him by studying what he has created, as King David wrote in the Psalms.
When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place. What is man that you are mindful of him? The Son of Man that you care for him.
Christianity clearly answers basic questions about whether science has the potential to be productive, safe, and interesting. But is that really any different from other belief systems? Here are 4 other views of God. How might each one answer these 3 questions? First, atheism, the belief that there is no God or gods. Secular humanism and some forms of Buddhism are essentially atheistic.
Atheists may observe that nature acts consistently, but there is nothing in atheism that requires nature to behave the same way all the time.
You're saying that because there is no consistent God who created and sustains nature, there is no reason to predict that laws of nature exist or that they will not change. What about the safety of studying nature?
In the atheist view, there is no God who could possibly be upset by people studying nature.
So, atheists see the study of nature as safe because there is no God, and Christians see the study of nature as safe because of the character of the Christian creator God.
Yes, and yet if God really exists, studying nature while arbitrarily denying God created it may not be entirely safe. The existence of God is evident in nature, and Scripture warns atheists against ignoring the evidence.
For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse.
Christians and atheists would probably agree that science is interesting. Materialistic Darwinism makes nature the creator, so studying nature is interesting to atheists who are curious about their beginnings and also interested in surviving the present.
It looks as if atheism provides some motivation to study nature, but not to the same degree that Christianity does. Why is it then that so many scientists are atheists or agnostics?
This illustrates why caution is needed when ascribing motives to others, particularly those with beliefs different from our own. For at least some atheists, science is seen as a way of somehow proving their faith. This seems to be particularly true of evolutionary biologists. Douglas Futima put it this way:
By coupling undirected, purposeless variation to the blind, uncaring process of natural selection, Darwin made theological or spiritual explanations of the life processes superfluous.
Let's look at another view of God. Pantheism, the belief that all of nature is God and God is in all of nature. Some forms of New Age religion are pantheistic. Because humans are part of nature, pantheists believe we are a part of God and God is part of us.
In pantheism, nature might be expected to act consistently because God and nature are the same. A lot depends on the temperament of God. The more like the Christian God, the pantheist God is, the more potentially useful studying nature may be.
How the issue of safety when studying nature would play out for pantheists is debatable. It would again depend on how much nature is personified and what its personality is. If science were done with reverence, probably most pantheists would regard it as safe.
However, studying nature by destroying lab animals or other natural things appears problematic in the pantheistic view. Damaging nature means damaging God.
Along with Christians, pantheists should be highly motivated to act as stewards of nature and to study it. Because God is in nature, nature reveals God to them.
The Christian motivation is slightly different. God is not in nature, but it is God's handiwork. God made humans stewards of His creation, and He is revealed in what He created.
Pantheism seems less encouraging to science than atheism. Simply believing there is a God doesn't automatically motivate a person to do science.
The third view of God we will look at is animism, the belief that material things, including living things, contain a soul that is part of them but distinct from the matter of which they are composed. Voodoo is an animistic religion. Because the answers one comes to from an animistic and a polytheistic perspective are similar, we will deal with them together.
Polytheists believe that there are many gods with distinct personalities. These gods may manipulate the material world to various degrees. Hinduism is commonly practiced as a polytheistic faith.
Animism and polytheism suggest that nature may not act in a consistent manner. In the case of animism, the spirit in each object may animate in different ways.
And in polytheism, multiple gods with different personalities, interests, and points of view influence nature in different ways and at different times, depending on their whims. So, as premises, animistic and polytheistic beliefs don't suggest that the study of nature is likely to be useful.
Possibly more worrying, investigating the material world may not seem so safe to an animist. The spirits could become angry and punish the investigator. Why upset the spirits just to figure out how water changes to ice?
Polytheists may face a similar difficulty. The gods might get upset at the idea of mere mortals gaining knowledge of their secrets.
When it comes to how interesting the study of nature may be, animism tends to concentrate on the soul or spirit in matter.
It's more important to study the spirits that animate nature than the matter that is animated.
In polytheism, capricious gods control nature. Trying to figure out how the gods will act is more important than a probably fruitless search to find natural laws.
That may partially explain why, instead of studying nature, the ancient Greeks tended towards studying philosophy to understand reality.
Caution is necessary when drawing hard conclusions about different belief systems and science. It may be possible to formulate Christian beliefs in ways that deny the importance of the creation. Some other religious beliefs may be formulated so that the study of nature is attractive. But it is worth noting that even people viewed as pagan forefathers of modern science, like Aristotle, tended toward monotheism, and that Christianity is a monotheistic faith.
So, it is generally reasonable to say that, while other belief systems do not clearly suggest studying nature may be worthwhile, Christian monotheism provides strong encouragement to studying the material world. This is because doing so is expected to be productive, safe, and interesting. The Christian astronomer Johann Kepler explained his motivation for studying the laws of nature this way.
Those laws are within the grasp of the human mind. God wanted us to recognize them by creating us after His own image, so that we could share His own thoughts.
What about counter-arguments against the idea that science thrives in a Christian culture? For example, much of today's science is built on knowledge that didn't come from Christian sources.
It was pagan Greeks who gave us geometry, and Hindus invented zero. It's hard to imagine science without these.
Muslims invented algebra and the Arabic number system. Without something like the Hindu-Arabic numbering system and algebra, much of science would be difficult or impossible.
It's not that other cultures contributed nothing to human knowledge. Different religious beliefs do not make people stupid. God gave gifts to all humanity so that everyone can discover Him through His creation. However, Christianity provides a motivation and philosophical foundation for doing science that may not be present in other belief systems, and historically modern science developed in a Christian culture.
Another common criticism of Christianity is that whenever Christians encounter something they don't understand, they stop thinking and say, "God did it."
Some people refer to that idea as the God of the gaps. Anytime there's a gap in what we know, we fill in the gap with God.
And if God did it, then why bother looking for another explanation?
This kind of assertion simply lines up the answer with the wrong question. The fact that Steve Wozniak designed some of the first personal computers is an interesting historical fact. But it's only by gaining an understanding of how computers work that it is possible to appreciate Wozniak's brilliant creativity.
The same principle applies to God. To appreciate how truly incredible He is requires an understanding of His creation. The Christian scriptures encourage believers to seek just such an understanding of Him.
But if from there you seek the Lord your God, you will find Him if you look for Him with all your heart and with all your soul.
Because of the way Christianity answers basic questions about studying nature, believers are motivated to engage in science. In general terms, Christianity is about empirical reality, not fairies, goblins, and ghosts. The Creator God is real, not an imaginary entity or principle. Jesus Christ was a real man in the real world who really died and was really raised from the dead.
Christianity and empirical reality are inextricably linked, giving Christians reason to embrace study of the material world, not deny it as some other belief systems do.
Christians see remarkable consilience between their faith in a created God and the created world they inhabit. This is particularly evident in the brilliant design of life and the universe.
A further motivation for Christians to continue studying becomes apparent when tension exists between the reality described in Christian beliefs and scientific descriptions of reality. Because human knowledge and reason are imperfect, tension will inevitably occur between some apparently logical interpretations of data and apparently logical readings of the Bible. For example, some claims of modern geology disagree with a reasonable reading of Scripture.
The presuppositions one starts with frequently dictate how one interprets data. Some of this tension may be accounted for by recognizing the different worldviews of those practicing science.
But different presuppositions aren't the only reason that some interpretations of data and some interpretations of Scripture appear to contradict each other.
This tension serves as a motivator for a growing number of scientists and biblical scholars to dig deeper.
Christians believe in a unity of truth and a universe that was created by a consistent, benevolent, wise Creator. All truth is ultimately embodied in Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, and the life.
Postmodernist philosophy embodies one illegitimate way to circumvent the inevitable tension between interpretations.
Postmodernism allows adherents to believe multiple private, logically incompatible truths, as long as they fall into different realms of knowledge. For example, what is scientifically true and what is spiritually true may not be the same.
The fragmentation of knowledge inherent in postmodernism is inconsistent with Christianity's insistence on a unity of knowledge, one God, one faith, and one truth.
Christians who believe in a unity of knowledge are motivated to pursue knowledge when a postmodernist might lack motivation to look further. If the answers they have are true for them, there is no need to reconcile tension.
Understanding the underlying motivation Christianity provides to do science helps explain the level of Christian commitment among many of the founders of modern scientific disciplines.
We have already mentioned many scientists who were devout Christians. These range from Isaac Newton, the father of modern physics, to Louis Pasteur, the father of modern organic chemistry, who also made incredible contributions to microbiology. It was Pasteur who ultimately demonstrated that even simple bacteria are not produced by spontaneous generation.
Yes, but there are many others. Robert Boyle transformed ancient alchemy into modern chemistry. Michael Faraday revolutionized physics with his investigation of electricity and magnetism. And don't forget the Austrian abbot Gregor Mendel, the father of modern genetics.
These scientists, and so many others like them, were not merely nominal Christians. For example, Boyle funded translations of the Bible, lecture series supporting Christianity, and wrote about his Christian motivation to study the creation.
For the works of God are so worthy of their author, that beside the impress of his wisdom and goodness, that are left as it were on their surfaces, there are a great many more curious and excellent tokens and effect of divine artifice in the hidden and innermost recesses of them. And these are not to be discovered by perfunctory looks of oscitant or unskillful beholders, but require as well as deserve the most attentive and prying inspection of inquisitive and well-instructed considerers.
When he was a young man studying in Europe, Boyle was greatly influenced by Galileo. Clearly, Galileo's conflict with the Catholic hierarchy did nothing to make Boyle conclude that Christianity discourages science.
In fact, it was during Boyle's youthful travels in Europe that he gave his life to God. Inspired by his Christian faith, he opposed the Aristotelian scholasticism of the time.
Development of great scientists like Boyle, Galileo, and numerous fellow Christians who rejected pagan understandings of nature depended on many factors.
These included economic growth, access to education, better communication, especially the printing press, rediscovery of old knowledge, adoption of the Hindu-Arabic number system, algebra, the invention of calculus, and many other factors.
However, to gain a true understanding of the development of science, it is essential to realize the value of prevailing Christian beliefs in motivating empirical study of nature.
Christianity encourages the study of nature, seeking harmony between understanding of God's Word and God's creation. Within the Christian worldview, science is a means of gaining practical knowledge, a way of experiencing beauty, and a means of better understanding the Creator. As a consequence, modern science is firmly rooted in the Christian understanding of reality.